Well, good morning, everyone. It is 9:30, and we're in the Charlotte County Administration Center, and this is the December 1st, 2021 Peace River, Minnesota Regional Water Supply Authority Board of Directors meeting. And let's start with, if you're able to rise, we'll do the, Commissioner DeRisso is going to help us with the invocation, and then we'll do the pledge.
Good morning. Dear Lord, we thank you today. Lord, and we give you thanks for giving us the opportunity to serve on this board, Lord. I thank you for the other members on this board, and I thank you for the public that we serve, Lord. The abundant water supply that you've given us in Florida, and Lord, I just pray that you'd continue to give us the wisdom to conserve and protect our ever infinitely important water supply. Lord, I just thank you for the people in Florida. I thank you for the way that you've helped us make it through this challenging last couple years, Lord, and we know that we can have faith that you have us covered into the future. Lord, we ask these many things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have just a few announcements to make. First of all, Commissioner DeRisso, who we just helped us with the invocation, is here for Commissioner Langford, and Chris Tanner is here as our attorney for Doug Manson. And before we go any further, there's a fellow who shows up here. I think he's watching us to make sure we don't make any mistakes. He's laughing in the audience. I know what you're up to, buddy. And is a good friend to all of us, Commissioner Ken Dougherty, who served on this board. So with that, we have our host, Hector Flores, is going to give us our host county remarks. I think Hector has 2 hours of introductions, so good.
Thank you, Commissioners, Mr. Chair. Again, welcome everybody to Charlotte County. We're glad to be able to host this meeting for the Water Authority. A couple things I jotted down. I think in this season of reflection, giving thanks, the holidays are upon us now. It's officially December 1st. We always appreciate our partnerships and our approach to regionalism. I think that has served everybody very well. Charlotte County, we definitely see the value in that. For me, I want to thank Mike, Mr. Coates, for his efforts. We've kind of continued what our predecessors have established. That's keeping the lines of communications open. So we've committed to that, to each other, to do that. So we appreciate his team, all of our professional staff. They are the ones out in the field, so they're the ones that execute your vision and your direction. So we appreciate all the work that they do. And so with that, I really just wish everybody productive meeting and a happy holidays. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. We have, we're open, it's public comments now, and there'll be 3 minutes. We have 2 cards. I'll take them in the order they were given to me. First, we have Richard Russell first for 3 minutes, and then Tim Ritchie.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Richard Russell from Charlotte, Florida. Yield my 3 minutes to Mr. Tim Ritchie.
Sorry about that. What did he?
He said he was going to yield his 3 minutes to Tim.
Okay, we don't, just so we all understand the routine here, we don't yield time. Mr. Ritchie, you've got 3 minutes.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, everybody in the chamber. I want to first say I'd like to thank Attorney Doug Manson for this 20-page report. I don't know how many of you read it, but I can pretty well assure you on page 1, it starts at December 9th, 2020. Mosaic notified DEP and FDEP regarding Mosaic North gyp stack about a tear. Remember, that's how Piney Point happened. This is the Mosaic Bartow South Gyp Stack. This is on page 1, 2, 3, 4, page 5, page 6. Then we get to Mosaic South Fort Meade, page 7, page 8, Mosaic South Pasture, and Mosaic Bonnie Mine, page 9, page 10, Mosaic New Wales, page 11, page 12, mentions Nichols and Green Bay, and Plant City. It doesn't mention Anuvia fertilizer. Why? Is Anuvia fertilizer piggybacking on Mosaic? Because I've been out there, and I'll tell you, I lost a bet. I thought it would say Mosaic. It said Anuvia, then Mosaic. We've got Hooker's Prairie. The 2016 New Wales sinkhole. 215 million gallons of acidic blended radioactive wastewater, or as they like to call it, non-contact process wastewater, burned through the limestone. 19 days before Mosaic notified the public. Prior to that, 6 months, was the Mosaic $1.8 billion environmental fine for the majority portion at Mosaic Green Bay, which they just fired up. You all know about the 71 spill, the 67 spill, the clay settling area. The seagrass is dying. Charlotte Harbor is very sick. Now, I appreciate everything you've done, but I am a private citizen, and we don't buy the lies. And Doug Manson, you were so kind to Mosaic. Thank you, gentlemen. Help protect the Peace River. We need better. We deserve better.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. All right, before we go any further, we do something here at Peace River that I've never seen done anywhere else, but it's a very nice thing. We're going to start with Ms. Holcomb, and we'll just go through the room and everybody introduce themselves. So, Terry, if you would start it.
Terry Holcomb, with Authority Staff.
Steve King with Black Beach. Ajay Kasabada, Black Beach.
Go ahead.
Mike Milet, Sarasota County.
Ford Ritz, Authority Staff.
Henry, Authority Staff.
Andrew Greenbaum, Authority Staff. Richard Anderson, Authority Staff.
Good morning, Katie Judy with HDR Engineering.
So, Ryan Lesser, HDR Engineering. Mike McGee, Black and Beach. Dave Bracciano, Hayden Sawyer. Steve Adams, Coach Florida.
John Ferguson, Southwest Florida Water Management District.
Chris Puzzler, Ardura. Mike Condren, Ron Caldwell.
Good morning, Dan Doherty, Charlotte County.
Good morning, Mark. Thanks, guys, for the hand.
Dorian Popescu, DMK.
Doug Ekman, Kimley Horn.
Kevin Morris, Manatee County.
Katie Gilmore, Manatee County.
Tim Ritchie, March Against Mosaic.
Richard Russell, Port Charlotte, Florida.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're on to the consent agenda. We've got items 1 through 8. Is any board member want to pull any of the consent items? Seeing no one wants to pull any consent, we'll take a motion for consent agenda items 1 through 8, please.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Truex.
Second.
A second by Commissioner Cruz. Any comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Chair votes aye. The entire consent agenda moves forward 4-0 with approval. We're now on the regular agenda. Item number 1, water supply conditions and year-end summary for fiscal year 2021. Mr. Anderson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. Richard Anderson of your staff, for the record. There we go. And as usual, this is an information item only. This is the time of year, as the chairman alluded to, this is a year-end summary. So we're going to take a look at a little bit longer picture of the water supply system, a 10-year snapshot of the river and the rainfall and the water supply, and then look at your 2021 usage as a utility and what you purchased from the authority. So as you see here, this is a snapshot of the rainfalls. We usually start with the rainfall. We get about 52 inches, 52.2 inches of rain a year in the Peace River Basin. As you can see, we have pretty much every year about an average rainfall event. Back in 13-14, we did have a couple of years there where we averaged about 46 and 45 inches of rain. This year, currently 2021, we're at about 47.8 inches. So a little bit down, but still plenty of water in the system to supply the river and our withdrawals. This gives us a snapshot of the river flow. The river flow varies from about, over this 10-year period, about 145 billion gallons, that's B with a billion, to a high of 458 billion in 2017. The average is about 290 billion gallons a year. As you can see, this year we're at 298, so a very average year for us for river flow. And this gives us a look at the river withdrawals, what we take out of the river every year on an annual basis. That fluctuates from about 9.2 there in 2017 to a high of 11.1 in 2015. And the average is about 10.2 billion gallons that we take out every year. Of course, this year we're at 10.8. So again, a little bit above average, but right about where we would expect to be. This graph combines the two previous graphs. This shows our river flow on the same scale with our withdrawals. So you can see the blue is what we withdraw every year, that approximately 10 billion gallons compared to what actually flows in the river. And as you'll see in a second, that is a very small amount. It ranges about 3.6%. And this is what I was speaking of. This shows you the average percentage of withdrawal over the last 10 years. And we had a high in 14 of 7.6 and a low of 2% in 2017. But the average, again, is right at 3.6% of the river's flow is what we take off every year to supply your needs. And this is a look at the annual diurnal of the river flow. As you can see, this is the same slide I show you all every month on a 2-year window. This is a 10-year snapshot. You can see we had some drier times back in 2013 and 14 when the river flow was down, and again in 2017. If you recall, that was a drought year followed by Hurricane Irma coming in and really dumping quite a bit of rain in August and September on us. So as you can see, we are able to refill the refill the reservoir every year when that rainfall does start in the summertime. And here's a snapshot with the river withdrawals overlaid with the ASR withdrawals that we take out. And again, we use ASR as needed, depending on the river availability of flow. You can see it varies from about 1.3 billion there in 2017 to nothing in 2014. So the ASR is there to augment what we might need to meet demands on top of the river surface water sources. And then here's a snapshot of the surface water storage every October 1st. As you can see, our goal each year is try to be full at the end of the rainy season, which is October 1st, November 1st time frame. As you can see, every year we've been able to top the system off and be ready for the dry season, with the exception of 2017. And that was more of a water quality issue than a water quantity. We had, as I mentioned, Hurricane Irma came through, and the water quality in the river was not good for about 4 weeks, and we were able to just use our storage and then refill after the water quality improved in October and November. So now if I can, I want to shift to, unless there's any questions on the supply side, I'll shift to the production. The This is again the 2021 fiscal year snapshot. For 2021, the authority produced 28.6 million gallons a day average. Your county and city facilities produced just over 49 for a total of 77.7 million gallons a day. 3.5 of that approximately was delivered by Manatee County to their consecutive customers. So the total authority use was about 74 million gallons a day system-wide. If we go through the individual customers, you can see Charlotte County, your allocation is 16.1. Your total usage for 2021 was 11.4 from the authority for about a 71% usage. You produced just under 500,000 gallons a day from your burnt store facility for a total usage of 11.86 for the fiscal year. The bottom graph, if I can explain for a second, this shows only each customer's usage from the authority system and your allocation. So for example, the red line is the Charlotte County allocation of 16.1. The blue line is your actual usage from the authority of 11.4, and then the bars show your individual monthly usage, which ranged from about 9.3 to up to about 13.2 for the fiscal year. Excuse me, DeSoto County. DeSoto County averaged 0.69 for the year, which was 102% of their allocation. They produced about 300,000 from their facilities out at the correctional facility for a total usage of right at 1 million gallons a day. Their usage from the authority, as I mentioned, they're at 0.675 on their allocation. They used 0.69, so just slightly over their allocation. And then their monthly usage varied from about 450,000 gallons to about 850,000 gallons a month. Manatee County, of course, doesn't use any water from the authority at this time. So what I want to show here is your usage to your customers, and then the water you export to your consecutives and Sarasota County. So total usage for the county was 36.7, or about 71% of your permitted capacity. You exported about 7.5 million gallons combined for a total production of 44.25, or 85% of your permitted capacity. And your range was from about 52 MGD as a high down to about 40.5. And Sarasota County used 14.3 from the authority out of your 1506 allocation. You imported about 4 MGD from other sources, Manatee County and City of Northport, and then you self-supplied just under 3 MGD from your facilities for a total of 21.14 MGD. As far as your allocations go, you again the red line, you're at 1506. Total usage was 14.3. And you ranged anywhere from about 9.7 MGD up to about 18 MGD from the authority on any given month. And finally, Northport. Northport's allocation is 2.86. They used 2.2 average for the year, or 77%. They self-produced about 1.14 for a total usage of 3.4 average for the year. As you can see, they ranged anywhere from about 1.6 from the authority up to 4 MGD in May. They have about 0.65 remaining between their allocation and actual usage between the blue and the red lines there. And finally, just a snapshot of the entire region. As you can see, we have 104.7 total capacity. We used as a region 74.14. If you include those consecutive customers, again, we're at 77.7, or 74% of all of the total capacity in the system. The graph below, as you can see, the blue line in this case is our contractual allocations to the customers, 34.7. The red line is the plant capacity of 51 MGD. So you can see here, we produced, again, an average of 28.6 from the plant, but a high of 33.3 and a low of about 22 MGD in July and August. So, last thing I wanted to mention on the slides here is, as y'all are aware, back in October, the authority reached out to your respective administrators to talk about a water treatment shortage that we were experiencing. And I just want to take a minute to publicly thank everybody and everyone's staffs on the response that we got to make that a true non-event. Even though we meet every other month and we discuss outages and we coordinate outages and try to not take more than one plant in the system down at a time, things do happen, and that was the situation here. Our plant was offline, and then we had a couple of issues with other major facilities having problems that were offline, and it was not a supply issue, it was strictly a treatment issue. But the response we got and the ability for everybody to cut back on their usage really made us get through it, and it was a true non-event. So I just want to take this chance publicly to thank everybody for their support in helping us get through all that. So with that, I don't have anything else, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Do we have any questions for Richard, Mr. Anderson? None. I just have two comments. First of all, I always bring this part of the agenda back to my board, and that first cover page, so the reservoirs and the ASR wells are topped out as of the timing of this report, correct?
Yes, correct, yes.
The other thing, because we've got two friends from Manatee County sitting in the audience, and my good friend Commissioner Cruz, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, on page 7, Manatee County's bar graph is much more attractive than what you did for Sarasota, and I just want that noted in the record, okay?
So noted.
All right, with that, we're going to move on to item number 2. Peace River Reservoir number 3 project, PR3, the Citing and Feasibility Study. Terry, Terry Holcomb, you're going to help us with this to start?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. Good morning, board members, chairman, Terry Holcomb with Authority staff. This item is for informational purposes only. There's no action required of the board. Our Peace River Regional Reservoir number 3, or PR3 project, was kicked off back in August of 2020, actually beginning of September. And it was a 16-month project. The first work order was to complete a siting and feasibility report. It was due December 31st of this year, and I'm happy to say we're on schedule and on budget. The authority staff have received a draft copy of that siting and feasibility report. We're currently going through and providing our comments to the consultant so that they can incorporate those comments into the final report. With us here today, we have Ms. Katie Duty with HDR. She's the project manager, and she will be providing an update to the board as well as a summary of that draft report. At the conclusion of Ms. Duty's presentation, we will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, Katie Duty with HDR Engineering for the record. I'm happy to be here today to give you both an update on where we are with the project and some recommendations for next steps. These are the 4 things we'll cover quickly this morning, just so everyone's on the same page. Since all of you are involved with lots of big infrastructure projects, we'll just give a quick highlight and overview of the project again, talk to you about the decision framework we used to arrive at our recommendations, the evaluation, and then next steps. So as a reminder, this PR3 project is going to be providing long-term water supply reliability to the authority and to the region. It includes significant infrastructure, a 6 to 9 billion gallon reservoir, new intake pumping along the river, piping, raw water piping to convey from the river to the water storage campus, and then replacement for the existing pump station. We need to upsize the capacity as we have more water to move around the system. As Terry talked about, our schedule, we started mid last year on the siting and feasibility study. This is the schedule planned for the whole PR3 project. So right now we're close to wrapping up this first phase. And really the goal of this phase has been to make decisions about the location for the infrastructure, the size, and the configuration of all the project features. We've also spent quite a bit of effort looking at approaches for mitigation. As we've talked before, the wetland mitigation requirements for the reservoir itself in particular are going to be significant. And so what are the most appropriate solutions for that? Updating cost estimates and really establishing the direction for us to start design and permitting next year. As you can see, we have about a 3-year schedule on design and permitting, and then an anticipated 3-year schedule for construction. The project then would go into operation by early 2028. And it is anticipated, as we've joked before, Chairman Mayo, about how it can take 2 years to fill something of this size. It'll depend on river flows and quantities, but it'll be operational by 2028 and water able to be used then.
Perfect, perfect.
So the decision framework we're using for the PR3 process, these are the major decisions to be made. Where on the reserve is the reservoir going to be sited? Again, where do we put the intake and location, pipeline routing? How do we interconnect everything? How can water be moved around between intake pump stations, between storage and the plant? And then our permitting approach. And I've talked to you about this in the past as well. The process we've applied here really tries to balance looking at the benefits of the project and looking at the cost to make sure that we have that overlap where we get the best value for the project. Our process we've used the last 16 months or so started with facilitated workshops defining with authority staff objectives and criteria for each of those decisions that we're making, and then applying weights and scoring to them so you can really make an apples-to-apples comparison of decisions that maybe don't have an apples-to-apples trade-off. The team then went through and looked at the technical feasibility of all the different options for each of these locations, calculated scores, and today we're here updating you on that. So in our facilitated workshops, we intentionally included a really broad group from authority staff to make sure we've got diverse perspectives feeding into the decision process. We held a facilitated workshop back in October where collectively the team brainstormed objectives and priorities and that weights and criteria. And then we held a follow-up workshop in June after we've completed the technical analysis. How do each of those options score against the criteria? And received input at that point, and generally there was agreement. There was a few places we went back and adjusted and relooked at it. So for the decision making under the collaboration and technical analysis, that probably about 10 months of the project, we held further workshops with authority staff to understand current operational needs and also future needs, thinking about the flexibility and functionality of a much bigger treatment system and storage system. We've also had a lot of meetings and discussions with different regulatory agencies. This will be a big permit for them to, or project for them to permit. And right now we're still awaiting direction as to whether it will be permitted by FDEP or the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a meeting later this month. Hopefully we'll get confirmatory direction at that point. Some of it was based on where we end up siting the intake. So depending on where the intake goes, we might have different direction from the lead agency for our permitting. But there are a lot of other federal consultation permits that'll have to be part of the permitting process as well. And then we've had multiple discussions about mitigation opportunities looking regionally. So there's a range of solutions that you might be able to bring towards mitigation. I'll talk about those in just a couple minutes. But regional partnerships is one we're looking at as well. There's a lot of really great data from the design and construction of Reservoir 2 that we've woven into our technical analysis. It let us get a jump start on contemplating the design for this reservoir and really thinking about how you can bring industry best practices to this big project for the authority. For reservoir siting, you'll see an image on the right side of the screen. The blue triangle is the reserve property. The bright blue are the two existing reservoirs, and our red, yellow, and blue footprints are the possible 6 and 9 billion gallon options for reservoir siting. Note that we've avoided the northern portion of the reserve. That's where previous wetland mitigation was constructed for Reservoir 2. And it's expensive and very difficult to permit going in and trying to touch those. So we're leaving those alone. We've focused our siting on the southern part of the site. The black and white dashed line that runs through the middle of the reserve is the wetland watershed boundary. So as you can see with at least our 9 billion gallon options, those are those bigger footprints in the solid lines, we will end up crossing 2 watershed boundaries, which complicates a little bit the permitting process. It's just an extra coordination step. For our intake siting, we looked at 4 possible locations along the river. Alternate 1 is adjacent and co-located with the authority's existing intake. And then we looked at several locations further upriver that had perhaps some more ready access than others, a former railroad line adjacent to an existing road, and evaluated the benefits of those, of putting in additional piping further away from the authority's water treatment plant and storage, with, again, sea level rise. So taking a look at future water quality issues as you apply sea level rise and changes to the river flow, how might that improve or impact the reliability of the authorities to be able to withdraw water from the river? The other thing we looked at is the property ownership adjacent to the river along that stretch. All of it is owned in a state trust, which originally we thought would be really beneficial. That might be easy to work through the process of being able to get access to that land. As we dug into it a little bit further, the state trust, the land was granted over with a strict conservation easement on cypress trees, and you cannot touch the cypress trees or you potentially have the land revert back to the original landowner. We talked to the State Forest Service, and while they said it's not a hard no, there would be a lot of extra process to think about that. So that information was woven into our considerations for the intake siting. We looked at several different system configurations, evaluated a range of solutions that ranged from pretty simplistic of running water in parallel from each intake to each reservoir back to the plant, and then more complex systems that allow water to be moved between reservoirs, which will help with operational flexibility. It also can help with water quality management within the reservoir storage. And then all the options looked at improving gravity flow back to the plant. Right now, the flow back to the plant is pumped. We talked about wetland mitigation as well. So you can see the upper picture on the right shows the bright pink mitigation A and B is what was constructed for Res 2. There's an area in the lighter pink called Mitigation Area C that was a conceptual design developed previously, but it wasn't needed to be constructed based on the impacts. So that's one area we looked at, is improving and enhancing the existing wetlands on site. We've also looked at a range of purchasing bank credits, doing on-site mitigation, which the authority's been successful with in the past, looking at adjacent properties and tying those hydrologically together to see if we can get wetland mitigation credits that way, and then broader regional partnerships. So the next step, once we've come up with various technical alternatives and evaluate feasibility and constraints, then we went through the process of applying scores, putting numbers to those different decisions to allow us to be able to look at trade-offs, and then estimating the costs. So I'm going to walk you through a few slides right now that show the scoring for each of the alternatives compared to the criteria that was established. So this slide you're looking at right now looks at the reservoir siting options. You can see alts that have both 6 billion and 9 billion. And the ones that come out with higher scores, because reliability is such a big component of the decision making, are the 9 billion gallon. So you make a bigger reservoir, you get to store more water, you've got an improved reliability. To note, alternatives 2 and 3 include impacts to the existing 42-inch line across the reserve. I think alternative 2 is a partial impact and only part of it has to be relocated. Alternative 3 is a more significant, and that's reflected in the scoring of preferred options. For the intake siting, so you can see these across the bottom are the different locations. Co-located means the one that's adjacent to the existing intake location. And as you look at the different contributions to the scores, maximizing the ease of O&M is really one of the strongest drivers, and it's highest scored in the co-located alternative. We also looked at minimizing environmental impacts and then those challenges with the easement. As we went through the technical analysis, we didn't see a strong enough driver of improvement in reliability for us to really overcome the changes in O&M and the challenges with the property ownership to push it further upriver. There are just days where there were, the TDS was high enough in the river that the authority wouldn't pull, or also days the flow might not be high enough, so you wouldn't have been able to pull anyway. The system configuration alternatives, flexibility and reliability are significantly greater in those second and third configuration options. And it allows the authority staff to move water between reservoirs and pump stations. But with that comes a lot more infrastructure. I'll talk to you in just a moment about the amount of piping and other things that go with any of these alternatives. And so when you add more infrastructure, obviously you have costs and O&M that go with that. For the wetland mitigation, right now really we came out looking at maybe a prioritized menu of how we might approach mitigation. Options that have the on-site mitigation are going to improve the certainty of the outcome because the authority can control the schedule of that. Other than dealing with the regulatory side of it, it can be built when it needs to be built so that it doesn't potentially delay the project. And then additionally, some of the options with the bank credits improve certainty because once the mitigation bank credits are purchased, you're done. So you don't have to worry about getting the approval at a later date for your mitigation solution. So we distilled all of that decision analysis into a single configuration that we went through the process of developing cost estimate for, and that's this configuration that you see here. So the yellow outlined reservoir is a 9 billion gallon reservoir, looking at maximizing storage and avoiding impacts to the existing pipeline, which runs parallel to the southern end of this reservoir footprint. It looks at intake alternative 1, which is co-located with the authority's existing, which really improves the O&M and the permitting and potential challenges with property acquisition. For costing considerations, we took a look at system conveyance alternative 1. It's the least complex system. It allows water to get from the river into the reservoir, from the reservoir back to the water treatment plant, and the interconnection could be looked at something either as part of this project or later down the road, adding some additional ability to move water around as it makes sense. So, construction cost estimates. You can see the different contributions of the major components to the project. So we have multiple pump stations that go in as part of this project at about $45 million. All of the pipeline and conveyance that goes into this, we've got about 5 miles of large diameter pipeline that is included in this estimate. So it's a significant number, but there's a lot of pipeline that needs to go in order to get water from the river over to the reservoirs and then back. The reservoir is estimated about $147 million. That's the 9 billion gallon reservoir. We went ahead and did a cost estimate for the 6 billion gallon reservoir just to see the comparison. And for about 50% more storage, you're only paying about 20% more in cost. And so the value of building a significantly larger reservoir provides the authority with that improved long-term reliability. So all of this adds up to about $304 million. A couple things to note, these are unfactored and unescalated costs. So these are today's value. Often when estimating costs for long-term infrastructure projects that will take several years to build, you might escalate out to midpoint of construction. And so there are escalation factors you could apply on top of that. There are other factors with market volatility and other things that you can weave into that number, but this represents a Class 4 cost estimate, which has a pretty wide range on it because we're at conceptual design. And then this dollars are just the construction cost. It does not include, I've got the footnote at the bottom, it does not include that wetland mitigation. As we work with the regulatory agencies to set a direction for that, we can get that number focused a lot more. So next steps, we're here today. And so we're working with authority staff. As Terry mentioned, we've submitted our draft citing and feasibility report with recommendations with a proposed approach to take forward. Some of the early milestones in the next step of work include starting Cara surveys in January on the reserve. There are specific timeframes that these surveys need to be done in, and we want to make sure we get that data early next year so that we don't have to wait a whole nother year to collect the additional data. As I mentioned, that we're hoping to get confirmation very soon on who the lead regulatory agency will be. And we're proposing developing a 15% design pretty early on next year. It'll allow us to confirm pipeline routes and footprints and other things and get a more detailed cost estimate rather than the conceptual design cost estimate that we've got right now. And then other field work besides the environmental surveys will be some geotech and geological work, as well as getting survey for topo and bathymetry so that we can then proceed into the design for all of the infrastructure. And with that, we are available for questions or comments.
Okay, let's start with you all. Questions for either Ms. Duty or Ms. Holcomb? Anyone? Commissioner Chu.
Just a comment. I had two, and she answered them in the presentation, so thank you. It's a good presentation.
All right. Anyone else? I, as usual, will have a couple of comments. First of all, I have to tell you that for all the teasing that I gave you, that why can't you build a reservoir in a year and a half? It's just a big hole in the ground. You obviously knew that I was slightly smarter than that. But I have to tell you, for the record, our staff, our leadership, and the consultants that worked on this, it's just an amazing job. The commissioners up here have been involved in very, very big projects, and the scale of this one and the sometimes conflicts between everything that has to occur, the engineering, the planning, the permitting, the construction, the mitigation, and then all the jurisdictions that seem to overlay on top of each other, not exactly on top of each other, with the local, the state, the regional, and federal. It is, I believe I speak for everyone, it is truly amazing that we are this far along. And I personally am delighted that maybe, I think we all are, that it gets done a little earlier. And I have embedded in my mind, Miss Duty, that it takes 2 years to fill the reservoir. That'll be on my tombstone. Thank you. And also that it's going to be, it likely will be a 9 billion gallon reservoir. It's just a wonderful thing. And it's all the people that came certainly before us, but it's thanks to all of you. So leave here today with all that good thoughts in mind. Anything else for these folks? Perfect. Okay, well, thank you. Item number 3 is the updated feasibility of solar power options at the Peace River facility. Richard, are you going to do that for us?
I'm just going to introduce our guests and then hand it over to them, but yes, sir.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. As Commissioner Mayo said, this is an update to the renewable energy study that we did back in 2018. Back then, staff worked with folks from Black & Veatch, and they looked at several options for solar energy application at the facility, from a very small, what I'll call point-of-use device, 200 kilowatt, all the way up to 75 megawatt systems, such as FPL puts in out around the 3-county area. So what I have today is an update to that report. We have Mr. Steve King and Ajay Kasabata here from Virginia, actually. Came all the way down?
From Kansas City.
Kansas City, okay. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Steve first, and then they're going to go through the presentation. So, thank you. Steve?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Appreciate you guys having us here. As Richard said, we did a report or study back in 2018, so this is an update to that, to look at new technologies. As you know, technology improves, prices come down, so that is, solar is not immune to that, so it's a good thing for the industry. So looking at this authority strategic plan and wondering how solar might fit, you can see that in item 2, your resiliency, planning for an environmentally thoughtful and sustainable, interconnected and adaptable system. And then providing affordable water rates that are fair and equitable, with the potential addition of solar, possibly reducing your O&M cost of purchased electricity. You can see how that might help with your water rates as well. In addition to, like I said, providing resiliency is having what would ultimately be a third source of power from the grid and your generators, and now also solar as a possibility. So in the industry, you can see the gigawatts installed have gone up tremendously, and with that, supply and demand, the cost has come down tremendously. It did see, or we are seeing, a bit of a COVID or supply chain bump like everything else, but that is expected to ease, and the prices should continue to fall from its peak back in, and this looks back to 2015, but you can see as the amount of solar installed goes up, the cost has come down, and as you drive around the area, it appears they can't build it fast enough. So looking at the scenarios, we compared the same scenarios this time as we did from 2018 to just to make sure we get an apples to apples comparison. And so starting off, this First one is the small, or we'll call a pilot size one, or get your feet wet kind of size system, 200 kilowatts. Comparing the key takeaways really is this is an area, the picture of where we potentially sited is near in between the two reservoirs, so it fits on that little piece of land there. Would probably power 3 of the compressors out at the reservoir system, and now with the new improvements in technology, again, would only take up about an acre as opposed to almost 2 acres before, and the cost has come down to from over $500,000 to below $400,000, rough order of magnitude. And then the payback period was, it's not on this slide, but in 2018 it was like 13 years, and now it's just under, or just over 12, or 11 years, sorry. So you can see the economics and the size and everything is improved dramatically. This is one of the more dramatic differences. The 2 megawatt size, which is also the net metering limit in the state of Florida, went from almost 20 acres required to down to 6. The picture here on the slide is on the island of Reservoir 1, just to show you that it would fit. It doesn't obviously wouldn't have to go there, but anywhere you would have 6 acres, you could get 2 megawatts of solar. And this went from over 18 years of payback to less than 10. So dramatic reduction in payback. And it will, you know, and the cost went from over $4 million to just over $3 million. And that would power probably 5 or 6 of your 200 horsepower pumps, which you have there again at the reservoir side of the campus. So scenario 3, which is 10 megawatts. In 2018, this was sized to basically be a net zero, where it would offset all the power that you bought throughout the year from FP&O. Now it's, you know, as your demands have increased, it only is going to meet a little bit less than all of it, maybe 80% of your demand. But you can also see, again, the size, the land needed went from 94 acres down to 36, which again is taking up now the entire island and a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 acres off of the island. Again, just as an example of how big 36 acres would be. So it certainly doesn't have to go there. And the cost goes from 18 million to 12, and the payback went from 17, just over 17 years to, in our analysis, to just over 8 years. Now this also depends on how you build this system, because again, there are net metering rules in Florida where over 2 megawatts, the power companies, or they don't have to buy it at retail, and there's some rules. So you'd have to either build this in multiple 2 megawatt systems, or try to get FP&L to agree to purchase the excess power, which in our conversations with them, it doesn't appear that is gaining much traction. So, and you can see you could, if you were able to build 10 megawatts, most of the equipment at the facility, and the water plant and the reservoir as well. So, and with that, we'll turn it over to Ajay, and he'll wrap us up.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. Good morning. So we also looked at a couple of other additional options here. This was Rooftop and Carport solar PV. This was not done in 2018. So we are actually seeing an increased interest with several water utilities and across the nation where they're trying to put rooftop solar on their admin buildings and others. So we thought, hey, this is something that we want to double check and see what this means. And so we looked at, if you look at this slide here, there are about 7 different locations where we assessed rooftops. We also looked at carport systems. And this slide kind of summarizes the economics. So ultimately, it's the business case that makes projects happen, right? So you can do all the engineering and conceptual thing, but when you look at it, In one slide, we're trying to summarize, the scenario 1 was like a pilot scale. Scenario 2 was within the net metering boundaries. Scenario 3 was how much you can do to offset your costs. And then you have the rooftop and carport systems. And you can see how the payback periods, strictly from a payback period, your 10.1 megawatt system seems most from a payback perspective, but it's also from a capex perspective. It's the highest. And we've also presented how, based on an EPA greenhouse gas calculator, how much of avoided carbon dioxide you would achieve by implementing these systems. So we talked to FPL. We explored if FPL would be interested in the 75 megawatt, solar facility, almost utility scale solar is what we call that. So they looked at the site. They expressed concerns because of the wetlands on site, and they felt that it was not cost competitive for them to, if you include all the wetland mitigation costs and all of that stuff, they're looking at better quality sites to put their 75 megawatt one. So we're still exploring. A couple of other, Stephen mentioned about net metering on smaller system sizes, but it's almost like ruled out that they would be interested in a 75 megawatt utility scale solar, where you'd be like a landowner, that kind of stuff. So what are the next steps? So I think the key here is for you to consider what are the perspectives you're trying to hit from a deployment. Are you focused on cost savings? Are you more focused on sustainability and green energy? Do you want to first go with a crawl, walk, run, where let's do a proof of concept and see what that means to us? Is there a PR angle to it? So that will help you decide what you want to do next with this data and take it to the next level. So if it's a proof of concept, you're looking at a smaller system. If you're looking at, cost savings for a longer period of time, maybe it's the 10 megawatt system. If you're looking at sustainability and green energy, that could also be the solution. So based on that perspective, you can think about the next step on how do you want to achieve that goal, and then do the next level of analysis. I think you can continue participating in the Solar Together program. There's a business lighting program. I think you should also follow the new Senate Bill 1024 that they're looking at revamping the net metering rules. I think that is something that we need to see the fate of that. I think it'll be probably, Jan 2023 onwards, not this Jan, but the next year onwards. We have to see what that does to the net metering rules. I think that's something that you need to follow. I'm sure whatever draft structure is there right now, folks would look at it in committees and redline it and all of that stuff, but that's something I would. And the key thing here is if you are interested in putting rooftop solar on existing buildings, you also need to consider what is we have not looked at the roof capability, can it withstand the additional loads and all of that stuff. Or if you're looking at new buildings, you can factor that a potential future solar panels installation on those rooftops as well in the future design. But that's from the next step. So wraps up our presentation, and there's a full report on this. And any questions?
Any questions? Sure.
I just had one comment, if I could. I think that, thank you. That idea of floating solar in the reservoir is a great idea, because I think another little benefit would be it would reduce evaporation from the surface of the reservoir.
Yep.
Seems like a great presentation. Thank you.
I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, for 7 years, I've been the second signer on Peace River checks, and I see what the power bill is. So we're aware of that real well. I will get Richard and Mike. I'm already in the middle of these net metering. There's also a House bill in addition to the Senate bill and the changes that's going to, if they pass. So I'll get that. We're already working on that at Sarasota County because some of our facilities do have solar power, especially the lift stations and that sorts of things. So that's a big deal. But but I'll get everything I have, which isn't much at this point because it's just starting its path, both those companion bills, and I'll get that to Peace River staff. But I assume whatever we all decide to do here, that you're going to continue to monitor that. I mean, that's a big deal. And as a guy who owns a 35-panel array, I'm sitting and get a zero bill at my son's house. I am watching.
Right. It remains to, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's also a personal issue. Well, thank you. I know we don't need, Richard, I know we don't ordinarily need a motion. Is there anything in the way of guidance that you want on which way to go, or you're just going to bring this back to us?
I think this is an information item only at this point, so we're going to bring stuff back. But as you know, you've already mentioned, we'd love your input, feedback on directions to go, and I think I've heard some good comments. So.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
We now have Mr. Tanner. Chris Tanner is going to do our General Counsel's report, and I'm told there may be the need for or opportunity for some motions on this one. So it's all yours, buddy.
Yes, sir. There you go.
All right. So at the October 1st, 2021 meeting, the board approved for the Project Prairie Pumping and Storage Facility an interlocal agreement between the authority and DeSoto County, a purchase and sale agreement for the Project Prairie facilities, and authorize the executive director to execute a Project Prairie facilities operational protocol. There have since been some changes after discussions between the authority and DeSoto County. And as the chairman mentioned, the items listed as informational, but Mr. Manson asked I request approval from the board for the ratification of these changes, which include, for the interlocal agreement, the date for the authority's payment to DeSoto County and the acquisition closing date has been changed from December 31st, 2021 to January 31st, 2022 to address a scheduling issue. The changes to the purchase and sale agreement are basically just to streamline the agreement. There have not been any substantive changes. The purchase price for the property has been added, which is $36,000, as well as an ingress and egress easement for the water lift station. So with that, those are the changes. Mr. Chair, the recommended action is to approve the revised interlocal agreement between the authority and DeSoto County, the purchase and sale agreement for the Project Prairie facilities, and the ingress and egress easement for the water lift station, and finally to authorize the executive director and general counsel to approve any minor changes to these documents that may be required. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Well, just let's capture everything that needs to be in this motion. Someone will make a motion and we'll get a second. It's to change the closing date, change the purchase and sale agreement, providing for an ingress and egress easement, plus an additional $36,000, and to get Executive Director Mike Coates to sign the agreement. Does that capture what this motion needs to say?
That does. I would say it is to approve the revised agreements, which include those changes which were changed from that October 1st approval.
Okay,
Yes.
so thank you so far. I know you got more to go. We need a motion on that. Motion by Commissioner Truex. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Cruz seconds that. Any comments? Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Chair votes aye. That moves forward. The first motion on item number 1 of the General Counsel's report moves forward with a 4-0. I still keep thinking it's Sarasota County, a 4-0 approval. Mr. Tanner, anything else?
No, sir, that concludes.
That was it?
That's it.
Oh, boy, okay. All right, with that, we have, we're going to explore everything that I've done wrong in the last 2 months. The Executive Director's report. Be kind, Mike, you know.
I have, Mr. Chair, I have nothing to report, other than I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, great holidays, and have fun with the family.
Well, thank you for that. And that also means unsaid that I made no mistakes the entire 2 months.
Not that I observed.
God bless you. Great.
I don't know about that. I got a phone call to make. Where's Nancy?
Yeah, you better keep him informed. Okay, the rest are routine status reports, which are in our package, and any board member comments. Start, Mr. Cruz, as we wrap up the year, anything?
I'm good. Have a great holiday season. Have a great new year, and I look forward to 2022 with all of you.
Perfect. Commissioner DeRusso?
I don't have much to say other than I appreciate what you guys do governing our water supply, and I feel like we're fortunate to have y'all and the Peace River here in our community. Thank you.
Commissioner Truex.
Well, just want to say happy holidays to everybody. JC, it's nice to see you up here. Love Elton to death. Commissioner Langford's a good friend, but so are you, and it's good to see you over here in Charlotte County. So appreciate you being here today, and happy holidays to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Could I put it in the record, Chairman, that I may be slightly better looking than Commissioner Langford?
No comment.
No, I'm going to comment on that, because, I'm going to gently comment on that, because I have to sit next to Elton for quite a while yet. You are right. And you are treated me nicer than Elton usually does. So I can't wait for that phone call to come. And all I want to say is I want to wish everybody here, all our staff, everybody that works on our stuff, a happy holiday. And other than that, for the first time in recorded history, I have nothing further to say. So unless anyone has anything else, we will stand adjourned. Great job.